All right, good morning. Good morning. All right, thank you very much. Welcome to this session on 12c for developers. Maybe I should have said for database developers, because I noticed there are a lot of people doing Java around. So you're all database developers, I assume, I hope? Yeah? All right, good. I'm Alex, I'm from Netherlands, so that's why I have this funky accent. If I'm not clear or anything, please let me know. I'm one of the Oracle ACE directors, and they sponsored me to come here, so I'm very grateful for that. I'm an independent consultant, and I'm affiliated with the Smart for Apex team as well. I wrote a book on Apex, or at least part of it. I tried to blog, I tried to tweet, and that kind of stuff. I always said I'm never going to write a book again, but they tricked me into doing yet another one. Anyway, Oracle 12. Right? The last release, or before 12 was released, 2009, the 11 database was released. So 2013, 12c came out, and it took them 4 years basically to create this release. So what did they do in those 4 years? What was the biggest feature they introduced in 12c? It was all about the multi-tenant architecture. The pluggable databases where you can unplug them, plug them, clone them, copy, all that kind of stuff. All right, so that took them 4 years. Very cool stuff, very interesting, but I'm a database developer, so it wasn't that exciting to me. It's exciting, but not from my perspective. So 2014, they did a patch release, and the biggest key feature in that one was the in-memory option. Very cool, very fast in query performance and that kind of stuff. But from a database developer, I was like, it's all nice, but it sounded more like a DBA kind of thing. So I was wondering, so what's in it for the database developer? So I started digging into the documentation and everything, and it turned out there's a whole stack of great new features in there. This is a museum in New York, and it's really great. It's a huge museum. And what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to take you to a tour through some of the features that I thought were very interesting in 12c. And as we only have 45 minutes, I'm going to go rush by all of them that I thought was interesting. Okay? Good. All right, let's go. 45 minutes to go. Okay, so the first one, the increased size limit. There's a tighter integration between SQL and PL/SQL in 12c. The limit in SQL was always used to be a varchar 4000, while in PL/SQL it's 32k. And if you try to create a table with a 32k length on your varchar, well, you weren't allowed to, right? Even if you would just go to 4001, they wouldn't allow you. But now, with just a little bit of DBA magic, you can create a table with 32k columns in there. Yeah, there you go. I thought it was impressive. I thought it was very cool. So that was just the first feature I really liked. You don't impress easily, so let's go up to the next one. The top end and pagination. Say someone wants to write a query where you get like the top 3 of most earning employees. You could write a query like this, but if you would do that, someone will kick your butt because that's completely wrong, right? Because it would filter on the row num and order by its salary. It doesn't work like that. What you normally would do, and people from other days would laugh at us for doing that, is write like an inline view, order your salaries descending, and filter out the row num less than 4. And you will get a top 3 most earning employees. Now with 12c, they changed the syntax a little bit. You can say, I want to fetch the first 3 rows only, based on your order by. I heard someone say, yes, it's like awesome, right? So you can say that nowadays, so that's good. You can also tell it to like put an offset of 3 rows and paginate through your result set like that. Sorry? Good, okay. So what they do, it's basically like a syntactic sugar they put on it. What they do is they rewrite your query. They use like the row number in there with a case statement, but your syntax is a lot cleaner, right? So it's basically still the same way they do it, like they push it into an inline view and filter on it, but at least it makes it a lot easier for you to write. And there's a little more to it. It's not just like the first 3 rows, but you can also say, I want an offset of so many rows. I want to have a percentage. So you can say, oh, get me the first 25% only. So you can filter by that as well. Nice? Yeah. Yeah, okay. So even with this like percentage one, they also rewrite it for you, and they use like a seal function to determine the 25%. Okay. Okay, next topic. Pattern matching. So for this example, just to show you what it is, pattern matching, I created a table, weather. It has a certain date on it and amount of rain that falls. Like I said, I'm from the Netherlands. We get a lot of rain, right? So that's why I picked this example. So with this simple table, I populated with some random data that's just in there. This is not the most exciting stuff that's happening here. The keyword for pattern matching is the match recognize. And the match recognize clause is very powerful, so I'll only talk about it briefly. So match recognize, that's the keyword over there. What you do is you describe it using a pattern on the data you're looking for. Like the classic example is if you have stock exchange where they go up and down, look for a V pattern or a W pattern, stuff like that. So you describe a pattern, which in this case is like I want 0 more better days, 0 more worse days, and if they're the same. That's a pattern. Basically just show me everything. Below that, from line 10 to 12, you describe how each of these better, worse, same are defined. Okay, so a better day if the rain was less than the previous day. Makes sense, right? It's a worse day if the rain was more than the previous day. Yeah, and it's the same, of course, if the rain from day 1 to day 2 is the same. So far, so good? Yeah? Okay. Going through your result set, going through your data, you can also say, where did it match? What was the classifier that it matched? So you can actually see which of these clauses, which of these definition that it actually matched on. Okay. So if you look at our data in that table, it's on August, like the first day of August. Well, there was no previous day because you only have August data. Okay. So August 2nd, it was a better day because there was no rain. Like the previous day was 14 centimeters of rain, while the second day was only 0. So it was a better day, right? Going to the August 3rd, 19, it's a lot worse than 2nd of August. Yeah, and so on. So you're probably thinking, well, is that all, basically? Because you can do the same thing with analytic functions as well, right? Of course you can write I hate that word, analytic functions like that. Just compare the rain to the previous day and label it better or to the worse or the same, bless you. And you get the same result set. Yeah? So, but what if you would want to look for dry spells, like periods where it started raining and then you have a couple of dry days and then another wet day? That's a lot harder to write using analytic functions because you don't know how many dry days are in between. Yeah? So that's a dry spell. So the first thing is we have to define what's a wet day, what's a dry day. If it's more than 10 centimeters of rain, we call it a wet day, and if it's less than 10 centimeters of rain, it's a dry day. Okay? So that's the definition at the bottom. Okay. So then we need our pattern. The pattern, if you want to look for a dry spell, like a dry period, we want to start with a wet day, 2 or more dry days, and followed by 1 or more wet days as well. Okay, and as you can see, it's like regular expression syntax. So if you haven't picked up on regular expressions, this might be a good time to start with that as well. So that's our pattern. We have a wet, 2 or more dry, and another wet going on. So the results you get back from a query using that match recognize is your first wet day, your last your first dry day, and your last wet day. If you look at the data, like August 10 to 12, so August 10 is a wet day, because it's more than 10. You have a couple of dry days, and another wet or 2 wet days behind it. So you get the August 10 over there, August 12 as your last dry day, and your last wet day on August 14th. Okay. So the second row in that output, you have the same kind of pattern. Wet, 3 dry days, and another wet day. Cool, thank you. Cool. All right. If you have any questions or comments, you can just shout it out. I'm fine with that, all right? We don't have to wait until 5 minutes reserved for that. Next up, the temporal validity. It's a temporal lobe, that's why the well, okay. For this, just to show you what the temporal validity is, I created a table addresses, and up until line 6, those are the regular columns. Okay, so just emp no, street, and start and end date. Those are the regular columns. This one is not a column, it's a validity period. Okay, you can say we have a period 4, and then you specify the name of that validity period, and you can tell it which columns to use as a start and end date. Okay, so it's not a column, it's just an extra clause added to the table. Okay, so my addresses table, we have some different streets, different house numbers, and different start and end dates of when I live there. Okay, so what's my current address? Yeah, exactly, the last one, because it does have a start date, but it doesn't have an end date, so it's still current. So what can you do with this validity period? You can ask Oracle, basically say, I want to see my addresses as of a period for the name of your validity period based on sysdate, and it will just only return that row that's valid now. Okay. You can also specify, okay, so what were my versions between like 2010 June 1st and today? So those were current at that time. So you don't have to write your own like clauses to get like the current data. Okay. If you don't like to put that as of clause in your queries, you can also put your session back. You can use dbms archive to enable it at a certain time. You can say the current, so only show me the current ones. You can also use this. Okay, I'll finish this for first. So you can tell it, I only want to see a current rows, which are based on sysdate. And if you would just query the table, you would get only one row back, because that's the only one that's current. Does that make sense? Yeah, good. Of course, you can also switch it back to all, and then if you would query the table, you get all the data. You can also use the as of clause and specify like a certain time. So if you want to see all the data, not based on sysdate, not on today, but on last week, you can put that as well. And you can only see the valid data or the data that was valid at that time. Yeah. Next up. So the question is it only for dates? Yes, it is only for dates. Yes, it is.
And you can have start date also for the first line.
So the question is, yeah. So the question is, can you also have like a start date null? But what would the start date null?
Forever.
Oh, since forever. Okay, yeah. Yes, you can have that too. Yeah. The question is like, if you're going to do a comparison with that, yeah. Well, you could do that. No, you can do that. Yeah. And there's another question in the back.
For example, this table is a dictionary table, and all the tables which are depends on this table, the records in this table are also will be hidden. If we specify that we want to see only the current records. For example, if this is an address and we have several tables which are dependent on this.
Okay, I see. So you have a table which has this temporal validity clause on it, and you have like satellite tables where basically are well, if you're going to write a query on it and you're going to put joins on it, this validity clause, which you specify, I want to see only the current records, is basically going to determine which of the satellites you're going to see as well. Yeah. Okay. So we can talk more about it if you want, but I'm really rushing now. So.
Join these periods. If we have two tables with periods, can we somehow make this?
Yeah. So the question is, if you have two tables with temporal validity clauses on them.
Like find the periods which overlap.
Well, overlapping is a different kind of beast, basically. I'm not going to dive into that right now in the overlapping, but you can have multiple tables with different temporal validity clauses on them. And based on your, it's just a regular query. We just put in like the extra flashback clause after it. So it just depends how you write that query, which data you get back. Okay. For now, I'm going to park this one, all right? If that's okay with you. Yeah. Okay. So next one, identity columns. This was one of those things where if you would talk to like a database developer who uses SQL Server, for instance, they'd say, well, you don't have identity columns, right? Because that's like how they identify a certain row in a table. And we'd all say, well, we don't need them, right? We don't need them. We have triggers. We could put a row trigger and use that. Identity columns are not per se a primary key, okay? So nowadays in 12, you can say, I have this table T, I want to generate it as identity, okay? In under the covers, it will create like a sequence for you, and will populate that ID for you, okay? So it's all about generated as identity. So if you're going to use this table, insert into T with a name, it will populate it, no problem. The thing with identity columns is you cannot use them, you cannot set your own values there, okay? Insert into T 42 and a name, it will say you cannot do it because it's generated always. It will always generate a key for you. So even if you would specify a null there, it won't allow you to, okay? There is a way to get around this, because if you use all the columns in your statement, there is something you can put there. Anyone want to take a guess what it is? Okay, it's something that was introduced in Oracle 8, I think, and it's the default keyword. So if you use the default keyword there, you can use it. Okay, then at least you have like a full listing of your columns, and everything is listed over there. Okay, using this identity column, you can always specify, just like sequence options, how you want this identity column to be generated. Because it is a sequence under the covers, you can specify how you want it. You can say, I have this table T, the ID is generated, and it starts with 42, and it's incremented by 2. So now if you start populating, see, this is like the sequence options. Now if you start populating this table, insert Alex, and you select from it, it starts with 42. Okay, add another table, and because it will skip 2, you get 44. A bit more along these lines, they also enhance the default values. Back in the olden days, if you would create a table and you had a default hello, and if you would insert null, what would happen? Yeah, you get a null. If you query it, there is a row there, okay, and it's null. Okay, because you specified it should insert a null. Okay, you might, most people would guess, well, it should be put hello in there because that's the default. So that's not the case. There is a way to insert that default value using the same default keyword. Insert into T values default, and you will get the hello in there, which is default for the for that column. So use the default, and you will get that. In 12, they enhanced the default values using the unnull clause there. So it will only, or not only, it will use a default value when a null is inserted into the table. Okay, so if you insert null, it will populate it with that default value of hello. Oh, and that's nice. I thought it was nice. What's also really nice is this default value, this default clause. You can also use it to populate from a sequence. So you create a sequence and use it default sequence next fall. Oh, come on. That's awesome. Yeah, that is awesome. I've been waiting so long for this. I thought it was so awesome, this one. Okay. I'm excited about it. Okay.
We just can't believe it. That's why.
You can't believe you're stunned. Yeah, oh, finally. Okay. Sorry. So just for an example, we're going to insert into it, and it's going to be populated. If you specify it yourself, you can also do that as well, because it's still a default that you provided the value, so it just gets that one. So even if you put in a null, so what's in my table now, put in these 3 lines, no ID, ID 42, and a null, and that's exactly what's in your table. One from the sequence, one that I specified, and one null. Okay. You can also combine these two, the default as well with the unnull. So only when it's null, use from the sequence. Okay. So you insert it into the table null, you get a value from the sequence. So one trick you can do with this one, with the default, is say I got 2 sequences, like a master sequence and a detail sequence, and also have 2 tables, a master's table and a details table. The master's takes the default from the master sequence, and the details table takes it from the detail sequence, as well as the foreign key from the master sequence. Okay, so that's the next val, that's the current value. So that's cool. So you can, now you can populate it first master, add some details to it, get your second master, add some details to that one as well, and you get your table populated. These are master 1, these are master 2. That's something you can do. Is that the best way to populate tables? Sometimes, right? Yeah, the basic and the standard answer, it depends. Yeah, it depends. Exactly. Next one, subquery factoring. You know, it's the with clause. You're familiar with the with clause, the like where you can use a query as a named query. So we already saw this query like earlier on with the ranges, the top n. Normally we'd have to do that, like create like an inline view, select from it and filter on it. Can't remember which version it was. I think it was 9 when they introduced the with clause, where you can have, instead of having a inline view there, you can also have a named query with the ordered employees, same select statement, and you basically select from that one and filter it afterwards. Okay, so those are related. Name had to be used over there. With 11, they introduced recursive subquery factoring as well. So now you can use the same query and use it recursively. So if you wanted to generate rows, like lots of rows, you could use this technique as well. What they did in 12, in that with clause, they introduced the fact that you can include functions and procedures in there as well. So just to show you what it does, line 2, it starts with a function, and it's called format name. And the only thing it does is basically returns the input argument, and in it caps it. So the first is going to be a capital, and the rest is going to be lowercase. And that function can be used in your regular SQL statement. Okay, so you get the output Smith, all in capitals, which is in the table, and Smith with an init cap next to it. Yeah. Okay. So the question is, so what about context switches? Because they always say, and that's still true, don't use PL SQL in SQL, right? In this case, it's different. There's a lot more technical reason behind it, but what you can think of it is like this PL SQL is basically compiled in the SQL engine, Okay, so performance-wise, it's very efficient. So you don't have the context switches. Okay, and this one only exists in this query. Well, it doesn't make any sense to have a result cache in this case. I'm not sure actually. No. Tonight over a beer, we'll talk about it more. Okay. So this, if you really need to use PL SQL in a SQL statement, this is very efficient. There's also another Pragma, I'll show you in a bit, which is also very efficient. So you can have a function in there, in the with clause. You can also have a procedure in there if you want. If you want to debug your PL or your SQL statement, I put in a procedure and it's just a wrapper for dbm as output. This procedure is called from the on line 11 on that function. It's not possible. Hang on, please. It's not possible to call a PL SQL to call a procedure directly from SQL, right? It doesn't. You can only call functions. So in this case, I'm using format name, which calls that function, which calls that procedure, and uses dbm as output. There was a question. Ah, okay. It's using the SQL engine, pure SQL. It is the SQL engine, yes. Yeah, they have two different engines, the SQL engine and the PL SQL engine. This one is like compiled only in the SQL engine. Yes. Well, you can still, well, no, in this case you can't. But okay, if you don't mind, there's a. Okay. Okay. Okay, I'm okay. Yeah. So there's a. So the question is, what if you would call a packaged procedure from this function, right? So the answer is it depends, and I'll show you in a bit where it depends upon. All right. I had this huge timer in front of me. It says 22 minutes. And right now I'm at slide 71. I still have 70 more to go. So, okay. Let me get this. So what's really interesting with this construct called a function called procedure, they always say sorting, always happens last. That's what they say, right? So I'll show you a little bit about that one. So now you get like your regular output from the SQL. And if you have your server output, you can also have your dbms output shown as well. So combining these two, like your named query, your procedure, and your function, all in one go, it's also possible. That's the procedure, there's the function, there's our named query, the order dems, and they're sorted by ename ascending. Okay, there is no order by on that one. It's only sorted on lines 15. If we're going to see what happens there, we get all the data out of the table and it's sorted, right? And you get the dbms output as it's processed. So it just gets you a Smith at the top. I thought it was an interesting thing. So now the answer to it depends question. What if you would have like a regular package function or procedure and you want to call that from SQL? The best way to do that is use the Pragma UDF. It's a new Pragma for user-defined functions. And what it basically does is you get it in your declaration, and what it kind of does is it compiles it as if it was a SQL, if it was compiled in the SQL engine. Okay? This one, if you really, really, really need to use functions in SQL, use the Pragma UDF. You can still use them in PL SQL, but that's a context switch. There. Is there restrictions on what you can? I don't know. My first guess would be no, but it would be helpful if they were deterministic, if you're going to use them in SQL. So that's my first thing, basically. 20 minutes to go. So, right, whitelisting. So say you have a procedure and it's called P, and you want to restrict who can call this procedure P. Like I only want P1 to call procedure P. Right? I don't want P2 to call it, and I certainly don't want an anonymous block to call this procedure. Now, if you're not on 12, and put it that way, that could be quite a challenge, right? With 12, you can say, I want it to be accessible only by P1. So here's the procedure P, and it's only accessible by P1. It's just going to do a dbms output. If you try to call this procedure like from an anonymous block, you say, well, you can't because you don't have that privilege. So you cannot even run it from an anonymous block. We said from P1 you can only call P. The call is over there, line 6, and you can create a procedure. Of course, you can execute this procedure because there's no restriction on that one in an anonymous block. And that works fine. Trying to create like a second P2 procedure, which calls P as well, there, it will give you, it doesn't even compile. It gives you the same insufficient privileges. Okay, so it's really nice on the whitelisting part. You can say which procedures can call other procedures. Yeah, data redaction. This image is actually from a book that was printed like this. Like the author, he wrote the book, and the editor said, well, you got to get this out because it's woo. And he said, no, I'm not going to take it out. So they actually redacted it. So they hid the information. So it was printed like this. Small side step. So what does data redaction do? Say you have a table. Ooh, it flickers, doesn't it? So you have a table, and you select from that table. You get the data, it redacts the data, and basically obscures some of the data. And which data you can obscure, you're going to use a special package to do that. So the data I'm going to show this on, I created an extra column, credit card, in the M table. Everybody knows M, right? Yeah. And it has all the credit card information. Using the dbms redact package, you can add policies to that table. So as the results are returned from the table, this policy is executed. When is it executed? Always. 1 equals 1. Okay, it's on that table. That's the name of the policy. And choose your name wisely. I will show you in a bit why. Which column is to be redacted to the credit card? We're going to use a regular expression. Another example of usage of regular expressions. And it's going to use any digits, and it's going to replace it by an X. That's the pattern. So again, learn about regular expressions. Second time this time. So if you're going to query that table, all the credit card information is hidden from view. Nice. You can also do more interesting stuff with this. Like credit card information is like one of those typical examples. So Oracle thought about that too. And you can say, I want to use the redact CCN, the credit card number, which is 16, into an F12 format. And if you query the data then, it gets redacted like that, right? And it only redacts the data if it's there, like the last two. They were one shorter. So, well, you're going to call with your credit card company. Does your credit card end on the number 2? Right, that's the information they see on the screen. And these two, well, does your credit card? Well, bye-bye. Okay. But they also thought of more interesting patterns. You can replace like in the middle, from the beginning to the first, and you can have redacted data like that. So it depends on your data, what kind of format you want to do this in. Okay. Or if you really want to freak out your customers, use like a dbms random to do it. If they query the data, they see it like that. And next time they query it again, it gets scrambled up again. So that's pretty funny. I thought it was funny. Of course, not only on numbers and var charts, but also on dates. You can redact their dates to like the millennium or the epoch, querying the data, and we'll always set the dates back to the millennium. So like birth dates. If people want to hide their birthday, there you go. Oh yeah, to the epoch, of course. If you want to change it, if you want to obscure more columns in your set, there are only going to be one policy on the table. So if you want to add more to it, you alter the policy, and it does that based on the policy name. So that's why I said choose your policy name wisely. If you pick the name and it says obscure credit card information and you're obscuring a date, that's kind of confusing. Okay, so now we have two redaction types, like one for the credit card and one for the dates, both of them, and that's how you obscure data. Okay. A word of warning: it's even though like the security developers, it's part of their scope. The way it works, you query the table and it gets redacted on the way back. Okay, so if you query data, credit card information, and you get like the first one out, and only if it's a 4, this is the data you get back. So even though you can't see the credit card, you know it starts with a 4, right? And if you're comfortable writing like a function in your with clause, you can basically get your redacted data as well as your unredacted data out there as well. You might say, well, that's a security hole. On the other side, I asked the people who created this function, this functionality, and they said, well, if you give someone access to your database who can write this stuff, you have a much bigger problem than your just your credit card information. Okay? So, how much time? 12 minutes. Should be due. Okay. JSON. They added JSON support in the patch release 12.102 for storing, querying, indexing. It's in there. So what's JSON? JSON is basically like your name value pairs, and you put it in curly brackets. You can have multiple of those as long as they're comma separated, or you can have collections of these JSON types. So this is one example. You have Friday the 13th. It's one of those horror movies, right? And the killer you just saw in the picture, that's Jason Voorhees. He's the slayer or so. So we have this Friday the 13th, and it's like a collection with different movies in there. Okay, and it's all name value pairs. And it's a lot shorter notation than XML. If you write this information in XML, you would have like a huge document there. What you can do, for the example, I'm going to create a table, T, with JSON data, and it's just a varchar 2. Okay. Now you can put constraints on that column, like to check if it is JSON, using the isJSON clause. So now this table just holds like a varchar, could also be a CLOB, and the check that's done, that it is actual valid JSON that you only put in there. Okay. So if you try to insert a value, and this is a valid JSON string, using curly brackets, colon separated, the killer is Jason Voorhees, that's fine. If you try to insert just a string into this table, well, it's going to break on that check constraint. Okay. So how can you use all these JSON functionality? In the select, you can use JSON value and use like a JSON path expression. That one. It's like XPath expressions, and you get data from this killer name. Okay, you get the value from that. To make it a little more interesting, we're going to add another row to the table, and we're going to insert that more complex thing. So now we have 2 rows in the table. You select the JSON value from that column using this expression from the document, go to Friday the 13th, the movies, the first one, give me the title, and you get the title back from this complex JSON thing. Yeah. So that's a JSON expression. In the from class, you can use this as well. Just like XML table, you can use the JSON table. You get this whole JSON object. It can be parsed using this column. Pretty common way if you've used XML before. Use the same expression. Use wildcards in there as well. Say which part of the JSON structure that you want to extract, and you get it a JSON as if it was like just regular relational data. So if you're interacting with web services which produce JSON, it's easy to go from JSON object to a regular relational representation. Try saying that 5 times. Okay. There's also functions which can be used in the where clause. The where exists. Give me all everything from this where there's a movie's name in a JSON. And it'll give you one row which contains that whole JSON object. Okay? There's the expression. Using the same check notation that we used before. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you build, so the question is, can you build indexes on this JSON data? Yeah. You can index them. Yeah, you can index them. Yeah. Well. Is there an so the question is there a native JSON Node.js driver available? Oh, I don't know. I'm a database guy. I don't know. No, I don't know. I'm sorry. Yeah. So with this table, we created like a check constraint, and we use the isJSON. It's similar to the isNull clause. So get from a regular table where some data is JSON, and you get all the data that is proper JSON format, and get that one back. Okay. You can also do it the other way around. Get me data which is not JSON. So if you have to import like a lot of stuff, and some of it is JSON and some of it isn't, you can use it, filter it like that. Okay. So to generate JSON, so this is only like querying it, using that. So to generate there is no functionality yet. They say it's going to be post the last patch release. And they were talking about like a JSON object or a JSON array. These are not there yet. So we'll see what happens in the next release. Okay. Doing pretty good. Last one, the call stack. Yeah, it's a haystack, but oh well, okay. The only way you could get information about like what was the call stack like in PL SQL, like in previous versions, was using dbMess utility to format the call stack, like this one. Okay, and that was well as good as it's gonna get. So to show you what I mean, I created a procedure which says show call stack, and just gonna do it's just a wrapper on that function. Okay. For the demonstration, I created a package, and it has some procedures in it, and they're all nested. Okay. There's one procedure which is called P in there, and the only thing that P does on line 21 is call procedure Q. Q is up there; it's in the declaration, and the only thing it does is calls line 18 calls R, and R is in there as well, nested. And it calls P, but not the outer P, but the inner P. Okay, so we have P calling Q, calling R, calling P. Okay, the only thing P does is show you that call stack using dbMess utility function, as well as raise a program error. So execution is stopped right there, line 12. Yeah? If you would execute this package procedure, you'd get the call stack, and there you have it. It's basically they want to tell you, well, something went wrong in package. Good luck. Very helpful, right? Yeah. 12, introduced UTL call stack. It's a whole package dedicated to this call stack. So instead of just having a wrapper for that show call stack procedure, it's going to use the UTL call stack, getting the dynamic depth. And if you write something like that, where you reference the lexical depth as well as the stack line units, and all concatenate them together, get the subprograms out of there, you'd execute that procedure, and you get like nicely formatted like that. P, which calls Q, which calls R, which calls P. Oh, that's nice, isn't it? Yes, that's nice. Okay, good. So that's a lot nicer. You get more detailed information about your call stack. Okay. You get the procedure name, yeah. You get it. Exactly. It would just tell you, well, it's in the package. Good luck. And then you'd have to go debug everything and try to figure out what went wrong, because most of the time it's not that obvious if there's a race program error. But this time at least, and it also distinguishes between the outer P and the inner P as well. So it'll give you a lot more detailed information. So, with 3 minutes to spare, talks about size, thank you very much. The pagination, the book, yeah. The top end and pagination. Pattern matching. Temporal validity. Identity columns. Whitelisting, yeah. Subquery factoring, that's easy. Redaction. JSON. And finally, the call stack. All right. So the images that I used weren't mine. These are the people that contributed these. We even have a little time left for some more questions. So, or you want to go for lunch? That's fine with me too.
About the identity columns, if it will not be problems if you do the direct load, because you can have triggers when you do direct load, and you can generate IDs, and in this case it will not be a problem.
Right. Yeah. If you it will work. So the question was was more. Sorry, if. If you do so that was in combination with the default values on the columns. Oh, okay.
Just if you generate on trigger,
Yeah.
you can't do.
You cannot. No. No.
And in this case you can.
With the default. Yes. Yes. If you so the question was like, what if you do direct load inserts in the table? If you have a trigger on it, well, it's gonna basically not allowing you to do the direct load. If you have default values specified on your columns for your sequences or that kind of stuff, you can do a direct load. Yes.
I think the question pretty much the same. If, for example, can I do the SQL load with a SQL loader to the table which has the identity column? Can it be done? I mean,
Okay. Yeah, I don't see why you shouldn't be able to. I haven't tried it out, but I don't see why if there would be a restriction on that part. If you would use SQL loader to populate it, I don't think it would matter as long as you don't reference.
I don't want to populate it with SQL loader. I just want it to be populated automatically, of course. So, for example, can I just do, for example, I will not. I will not write this column name in my control file, and it will be populated automatically.
Yes, it will be.
Okay.
It should be, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
As long as you don't reference that identity column, then you don't. I would say lunch. And if you, this afternoon I got another talk. It's about the model clause. If that ever freaked you out. Yes, it does. Yes, it does, yeah. The model clause. So.
About JSON, how it is different from XML or do the same thing with nested tables or XML?
S- so the JSON, it's basically like a set format that you have to, like the curly brackets and the square brackets, the name value pairs, and it's a lot shorter. And yeah, you can do the same thing with either JSON or XML. Yeah.
With nested tables too, you can do the same thing. You can have only nested tables.
Yeah, sure. So so why JSON? Okay, I think we're going to discuss it over lunch. So 'cause everybody seems to be leaving. Yeah, if that's okay. All right.